Good afternoon. Terry Beanstalk. Welcome to Digital Hollywood. We have a great panel this afternoon. I'm very laid back on these panels. For those of you who have attended mine over the many years I've been doing these with Victor, I'm a great believer in we're here for you, you're not here for us. So the more questions you ask and the issues you have in your business that you want to solve, we try to put together a group of people who will help you solve those problems. Don't be shy, ask questions, interrupt, give your opinions, and make this AR and VR, make it interactive. We're not going to do any PowerPoints. We're going to talk about trending issues, and but again, the best issues to talk about are the ones that are on your mind, not what's on their mind. So with that, that's why I'm standing here. I want the panelists to talk to you, not to me, and we'll just feel free to get my attention, raise your hand as issues come up and questions come up. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and give a short description of what they do and who they do it with, so you understand their perspective. And with that, we'll start. So with that,
sure. Hey everybody, Brendan Thomas here with Pluto TV, head of distribution there. And Pluto TV, if you're not familiar, is the leading streaming TV service. Short pitch is we license content from over 130 content providers. We program channels and we distribute them for free via an app that's available just about everywhere Netflix is, and a few places Netflix isn't. And that's Pluto TV.
Eric?
Sure. Hey everybody. So I lead our content and distribution efforts for Elation. We have two owned experiences that you might be more familiar with. Crunchyroll, which is the anime service, and our newly launched SVOD aggregated service, Verve, which is spelled VRV. I get to play both sides of the table, so I'm responsible for getting the Verve and Crunchyroll apps out on all the different distribution platforms, in addition to figuring out how to thoughtfully distribute our content in other arenas, which we can talk about. And then on the Verve side, which the majority of my time is spent, it's finding the next set of content partners for Verve. So today we have Crunchyroll, Drama Fever, Shudder, Curiosity Stream, and about 10 other channels. And we're looking to add more and more channel partners to Verve, in addition to licensing content and doing our own originals.
Bob.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Rodriguez, and I'm CEO of a Miami-based company called Natcom. We're a former NBC-affiliated company, and what we do is produce and distribute short-form videos, a lot of it, about 1,500 originals a month, and we distribute it throughout the hemisphere. So everything we produce is in Spanish, English, and in Portuguese. And besides distributing to the big players like Verizon, Amazon, etc., we also distribute to second-tier and third-tier publishers. We provide video technology, everything related to the video experience, including, of course, our library of 20,000 titles. Recently, we signed a global agreement with Warner Music, so we are not only producing content for Warner artists, such as Bruno Mars, we're also distributing their library in select parts of the world.
Ryan.
Hi, Ryan Nugent with Gunpowder and Sky. We are on the studio side, so we produce, finance, distribute, and market content across platforms and formats. So some recent projects to give you a sense of what we do. We have a theatrical release coming out next month with Nick Offerman called Heart to Beat Loud that we are distributing, and we have a sci-fi brand called Dust that we own and operate across Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and we actually just launched on Verve last week with Elation. We have a nice little animated series on historical stories from musical artists, and so that's on the AT&T Audience Network, but it's also right now being distributed in theaters as part of the pre-show. So that kind of gives you a sense where we produce short form, mid form, long form, and we sort of distribute across platforms.
Vinny.
Yeah, I'm a last-minute substitute here, so that's why I turned down my sign here. But my background, I'll give you a little bit of, because it's not in the program. I was at MTV for 17 years in production and programming, launching channels in Brazil and throughout Asia, as well as working here in the U.S. I was head of production and programming for G4 when Comcast launched that video game channel. And then I worked with Terry on a mobile marketing company called Mobile Active for a few years. Currently, I'm working with Occupy Democrats and helping them put together some podcast and video efforts. And last year worked on a big OTT project that never made it off the ground, so I've got some cautionary stories as well.
So we're covering here long form, short form, platform. So there's a lot to cover. Let's start just with the overall business context of internet-based television. What are the things that you've learned as you've started up these companies that are the things that disappointed you and gave you a hard time, and the things that were pleasant surprises as you were doing this? You
Sure.
want to start?
Yeah, why not? Pluto's been around about 4 years, and I would say the first thing that popped into mind as you were talking, Terry, is obviously timing is everything in a new venture. It would be easy to try an internet TV, and I'm sure many in the room have been in different spaces at different times. It'd be easy to try something like Pluto at the wrong time. I think we're very fortunate that, and we can go ahead and chalk it up to the co-founders' foresight, or just being very lucky that we launched at exactly the right time when cord cutting started accelerating and TV dollars in terms of advertising started flowing to OTT or streaming solutions. But being able to kind of prove our MVP thesis 4 years ago that people will watch more of the exact same content, because we started by curating and programming YouTube content, if it's made easily accessible in a lean back environment, not scrolling through tile after tile of finding the next thing to watch, being able to prove that and then build a business where we were able to license some early premium content in 2015, start early monetization into 2016, and then turn that into deals with most of the major studios, broadcasters, et cetera, over the last 18 to 24 months or so, and start building a real business on top of that, with kind of the wind at our backs, with the market shifting as it has in terms of consumption habits, in terms of advertising dollars, et cetera. It's really been fortunate timing, I guess you could say. So that's kind of the first thing that popped to mind, is really being
what's your
aware.
Model? What's your model?
Yeah. So we're free and advertising supported, and in terms of advertising, it's very simple. It's like traditional TV in that for every hour of content, we program a certain number of ad breaks or ad pods. It's actually less than traditional TV. I think traditional TV hovers around 14 to 18 minutes, depending on whose network you're on. We're less than that. We're about a 20% ad load max, and in many cases less than that. But it's what in the digital space might have been called mid-roll, and in the linear space is simply TV advertising. But it performs like that. So for those who haven't used Pluto or are familiar with it, we're primarily linear. So we license content, movies, TV shows, digital. We program it into linear owned and operated channels and networks. We also take and redistribute existing channels. But of the 100+ channels we make available for free, the majority are owned and operated brands you won't find anywhere else. And so it probably makes sense to give an example. A good example is a channel called The Feed, which is like tech and geek culture. In fact, G4 content would have been at home on that network, on this network. So that's a Pluto owned and operated network. You won't find it anywhere else. An example of the programming strategy for that, you might find a clip of an unboxing of the latest and greatest phone from Samsung. You might find a show like The IT Crowd. And then at prime time at 8 o'clock, you might find a movie like Hackers, programmed and available. And it's all for free. It's all tied to a guide, just like traditional TV. There's no education needed for most consumers on how to use that. And then they're able to tune in on just about any device where you can get an application that displays video.
What about length of content?
Sure. So primarily long form, TV and movie length. We did start in digital first, and digital short form does represent a significant portion of our content, but the majority of it over the last 18 months has moved to premium long form.
And I understand that you have contemplated subscription models moving to subscription.
It's true. Yeah. In 2015, Ken Parks, Spotify's former chief content officer, left Spotify to be our executive chairman. All the press at the time, not inaccurately, was Pluto has aspirations to be the Spotify of TV, meaning a freemium model where we have a free product and then eventually have a subscription upsell for that. It's been interesting. So it's now 3 years later. Free is still the name of the game for us, and that's because advertising has been performing so well. Like I mentioned, the market headwinds and TV ad dollars flowing from the lack of availability and lack of audience reach, trends that we're starting to see with cord cutting in traditional TV space. It's been really honestly beneficial for us to stay with the free value proposition, and what better way to grow a customer base.
Eric, what are you learning?
Sure. So my background a little bit. So I was at Hulu for 4 years, and I joined Hulu right when we started Hulu Plus. So I had the fortitude of seeing and growing one of the early, next to Netflix and Amazon Prime, an early SVOD service. So in terms of what I've seen, well, I'll talk about our model quickly just so you guys have that context, and then I'll talk about what we've seen in the space. So our model with Verve is it is an app, and you can go in there. We continue to believe that channel brands matter, and that programming catered to specific audiences matter in terms of being able to speak to them versus kind of just the broad audience play. So on Verve, we have 10 different channels. Each channel exists as an SVOD typically in its own environment, but you can watch that for free with ads if you choose, or you can decide to pay the subscription price dedicated for that channel. So Amazon Channels kind of does this, but they don't have the free piece. So we do believe in the AVOD and SVOD model. And 90% of the content on Verve is freely available with ads, but it's that 10% that's behind the paywall or fully and exclusive and new that people pay for. So we have widened the funnel to bring in the largest addressable audience possible. There are a lot of places to watch content now. So the more barriers to entry you create, the more difficult it's going to be for them to come. So we open that up. We believe in the freemium model. And then it gives us the chance, if they're already in our doors, already using our product, to convert them to pay. So we have aggregated these channels together that we think matter and speak to their audiences. And I think as we've been seeing in the space, you kind of had we're seeing everybody leave the cable bundle and go at their own and build their own SVODs or their own channels. And that's awesome. It's cool to see because they're kind of getting more direct to consumer. It's very, very hard to do that. I think we've seen a lot of folks in the last couple of years fail to do that from some pretty meaningful traditional media companies from, I won't name names, I guess. You guys all know who they are. So we know how difficult that is. So then you begin to see the power of aggregation. So initially what we did is we thought just pulling all these different channels together in one place with one account, with one credit card, versus having to go to all the different destinations and devices and try and figure that out and forgetting your password on a Tuesday night with your wife when you want to watch a show. They're all there together. So that was one piece, but that still didn't cut it. Because aggregation is, you kind of have everything on its own, you aggregate it together, and then you need the last piece, which is pricing and value. So we did put a bundle price together for all these channels. So you have the flexibility to choose the channels that you want for their discrete prices, or for $9.99, you can get access to everything on Verve. If you're to buy all the independent channels on their own, it'd be about $60. So it's a pretty meaningful value. And I think that's where the world's going to begin to head is, yes, you can aggregate all these things together. And you're seeing that if you're PlayStation's doing it, Comcast is doing it, more MVPDs are doing it, tech platforms. But you still need to create that unique value proposition that's going to kind of really bring somebody there. Because I think all the user experiences are not that different. It's just getting comfortable with them. So it's really about what is that value, and then how are you speaking to that audience.
So Bob, what have you learned on the short form side? We've been talking about long form. What about on the short form
Well, I
video?
think on the short form specifically, it's a golden age for short form. And the way we look at the content side of it is you have to have two things. You have to have enough scale to make a difference. And that's the one lesson we learned when we first acquired the company from NBC. We were producing roughly 20 originals a month, and we ended last month at 1,500. And to do that, you had to crunch your costs. So you had to be premium, but you had to be able to get an ROI. So we think there's a couple of trends that we're very excited about. One is the globalization of content. We're specifically focused on the hemisphere, and we say that because our company goes with the motto of we are hemispheric focused, country agnostic. We want to be able to develop content for the areas that we believe can benefit from it. So in Mexico, as an example, we have a very not only do we operate our own offices in Mexico, but we have a content-specific initiative for Mexico, as we do with Colombia, as we do with Los Angeles, as we do with Miami. And what we're seeing is that it's all about distribution. So if you don't have distribution, you may have, it's like someone who discovered gold. It may be worth something to them, but if somebody doesn't put a value on it, you're not going to get your return on it. So more and more, what we learned is we couldn't count on the large distribution houses to carry our content. Early on in the days of NBC, it was a non-factor because they were developing their second screen and so forth, but we decided that it was very important to put control of distribution in our hands. And today, we average about 100 million video views a month. About 60% of it is coming from Latin America, 40% from the United States. We're projecting to hit 500 million by the end of next year, so that would be by the end of 2019. And more, we are finding advertisers. We have 125 advertisers today in our portfolio, including the largest brands in the world, from Coca-Cola to Nike to McDonald's, etc. And what our pitch to them is always, we're brand safe. Whatever you are attaching yourself to, since we control the IP and we control the content, we can control the outcome of where that is. And more, I think brands are migrating to that type of philosophy.
Vinny, you've consulted to a lot of startups for OTT programming. What are the challenges? We've heard about some of the successes. What do you learn from some of the failures?
Well, I think certainly the fact that there's just so much out there right now. It's a very crowded field. So having a solid concept and a solid audience that you have in mind that's going to view your content, I think is extremely important. I think there are some opportunities, especially as you see Netflix and Hulu and some of the other platforms start to move more and more towards original programming. It means that licensing opportunities are much greater. As the contracts expire for programming that previously was in the Netflix universe or in the Hulu universe, that programming is up for grabs now. And while there are a lot of channels, OTT channels that can buy them, if you're well funded enough and can aggregate a great package, I think you've got a chance. But I think the biggest challenge is marketing and awareness in a very crowded field.
So Ryan, let's talk about content creation and how that's been impacted by OTT networks. How is distributing through the mobile and the web influenced the way content is being created, both in length and also format?
Sure. Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind is like kind of having the capabilities to produce content, and to Vinny's point about marketing and awareness. So for Gunpowder and Sky, the way we've built the studio from scratch is to have the capabilities of production, distribution, and marketing all in-house, and kind of as a feedback loop for our business, because we really do believe if we are going to be content producers that we have to be experts and have the capabilities to figure out how do you tell a story and produce content in 15 seconds, but all the way up to 90 minutes for feature-length content. And then the marketing, we do our marketing across our content, features included, all in-house. And part of that is because we really believe in having the capability and expertise to not just produce great content, but how do we make sure people show up and view that content? So whether it's on the channels that we build on YouTube and Facebook or Instagram, but for our theatrical releases, how do we, as a company internally, produce assets, own the distribution, run the paid marketing, create the partnerships to actually get people to show up to our films as opposed to outsourcing that. So I think in content production, it's really about what capabilities you have in-house and what expertise. And the other thing I'll say is partly what feeds that, and something I oversee at the company, is insights and data and analytics. So again, part of the value of the digital content distribution is the real-time data that you get back about your audience and how they're watching and how they're engaging with the content. And so that we see as a very critical data input for how do we make content. So we're always iterating on format strategy in real time based on the data that's coming back and creating that feedback loop from launching, producing, distributing, and then seeing what the data is telling us to change or keep on the strategy.
Well, what are you learning on the short form side of what works, what doesn't work? What does content have to be to work on short form?
Depending on what the audience, finding your audience is the most critical component. So we have everything from news to health, wellness, entertainment. I mentioned music. We're expecting to sign one of the biggest sports organizations in the world in the next 30 days. So we'll be producing a lot of original content in sports. That works very, very well, specifically Latin America and more specifically soccer. But finding your audience is critical. What we're finding as we go through the distribution matrix is that there are pockets, music as an example. We know that roughly speaking, the top 3 music companies are generating somewhere north of 50 billion video views a month. So when you start looking at those numbers, and a couple of years ago it represented about 40-some-odd% of all YouTube's traffic. So these numbers are staggering and they're only getting bigger. But people are going to different places and different destinations to get something. So when we go to our distribution platform and provide them Warner Music, we're going to the sites that have a loyal fan base. They're not going to YouTube to get the content because in many instances it may be things like they want to see the lyrics, they want to find out more about the artist, etc. So they're deeper in the relationship than YouTube may be. But the audience is wide and the audience is deep. And so content is all about finding the audience and then making sure that you're providing them what they're looking for at scale. I can't overemphasize that enough. I think those that have attempted to do content and be purist and perhaps do one-offs, you're never going to make it in this digital world. We learned the hard way. You have to have scalability. You have to have a lot of content out there. Otherwise, your viewer, your user is simply going to go elsewhere. There's too much, like Vinny said. It's just so much. There is so much content out there. To build a loyalty, you have to have a lot of it for the audience that you're marketing yourself to.
So as you're creating short form content, what are you learning on what you need to do to enhance the retention of the viewer?
Well, because we developed our own video player technology, we have back-end information that's proprietary to us that we make available to our publishers. We know every single video, not only who's viewing it, but we certainly know from a geo-targeting perspective, even a psychographic, demographic perspective. We know what the video through rate is, percentage of views all the way through. We know the trends. We can simply say a big music star is going to get a lot of traction. I use Bruno Mars as an example because he's a global artist, but there are a lot of other things under the hood, if you will, that if you program against it, you can develop a lot of content for it. It could be common, trends that are happening, it could be technology, it could be arts, etc. But we're always looking at the data. The data is our friend, and we are led by what we're finding in that data and in the region that we're developing it. So we may have content that's producing very well in Brazil and not doing well in the United States, and we're going to have to change it up for the United States because something is happening and the data is telling us that something is happening.
How do you deal with discoverability with short form, especially with short form?
Well, for us, we try to use Facebook as our friend. By the way, Facebook is our largest client because we work with them in a partnership throughout the hemisphere, where there's a lot of things that we're doing with Facebook and YouTube and Google as well. So we look at them as our friends, but we compete with them as well. And as far as what we're doing at any given time in terms of getting people out there, our universe today of distribution outlets are averaging about 500 to 700 million uniques a month. That's bigger than a lot of the big portals out there. Now, there are a lot of second-tier portals that comprise that number. So we'll go into the market with our publisher partners and identify what needs are there and what other things they can do to promote the content. Since we are providing them original content, and this isn't content that's been regurgitated 100 different ways, when we go to a relationship with a publisher, it's because we have given them some content that their audience wants.
What do you mean by second-tier publishers?
Anything that's not large portals in general. So these may be, our sweet spot is someone that has somewhere between 5 million and 15 million uniques. Could be music, could be sports, could be health, could be wellness. Those are the second-tier publishers that have less video sophistication. So when we go in with our library, we go in with our production output, we go in with our licensed properties and our video technology, and our advertisers, of course, they're more likely to want our content versus others because it's original in nature. And by definition, we are producing content for those publishers.
So, Brendan, on the long-form side, how do you deal with discoverability? Do you have a guide?
We do, yeah. We kind of operate on the thesis that people don't want to work that hard to be entertained. And again, that holds true with the Spotify analogy I brought up before, where, of course, they built their brand as the on-demand music service, but you'll notice that they shifted to playlists and curation. So our second largest team is actually our programming and curation team at Pluto TV. And we do treat each channel as if it were its own network, because it basically is. We have something for everything. You know, there's an app for that, or at least they did 10 years ago. We say there's a channel for that. So we can appeal to just about any demographic, but each channel has its own programming strategy, which is very heavily informed by our data and what demographic we're trying to reach and grow and influence. And then so the difference between like the internal network strategy and then the overall guide strategy is because we own the guide and most of the, let's call it the vast majority of the inventory within those channels in the guide, we can move people around. Which is kind of fun and maybe a little different than how traditional TV has approached. They always want you to come back later or keep watching. We're okay if you skip around. In fact, we'd prefer that you watch a half a dozen or more channels on Pluto TV, because those are the customers that really start developing TV-like viewing habits and start using Pluto TV in a daily way.
Are all the shows on demand as well as streaming, or?
They're not. We do have an on-demand feature, and it's again, our bread and butter and our focus is very much linear, but on-demand is something we launched last month. It's a free on-demand feature as well, so ad-supported as well. It's a good selection in our library. Absolutely, it's thousands of movies and hundreds and hundreds of TV series available from partners like MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers, etc., Lionsgate. The list goes on and on. 130 different content partners. But it's a supplement. It's an addition to our linear guide, and it's a way to have a more complete viewing experience.
Eric, how do you deal with the discoverability?
Yeah, I mean,
did you aggregate subscription services as well as free services? How does the consumer, the viewer, figure out what to watch where?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always the biggest issue, and as to the amount of content that's out there, it becomes trickier and trickier, and it's part of the reason why we've focused our efforts even more so. But yeah, from a data set, we actually there's about 10 to 15 people that are on our machine learning team that have just rolled out our algorithm, kind of things you would like, kind of the Netflix approach, right? That's kind of what Netflix popularized. But what we've also seen that's been playing a lot more into our marketing and our focus around caring about a brand and a certain community, which you talked to, there's a level of a curation that this was made for you, or that we get it. that does matter, like a human element to it. So with a lot of our marketing tactics, we are rolling out certain dedicated landing pages and different fun features, forms, commenting, live functionality where you can enjoy that content with friends. So there is kind of like this tie back to like, yes, I like to be programmed to, and it is really easy and you need to do that. It's kind of like table stakes. But we are also trying to tap more into that human element and explain why we program these things, have a direct communication with our users, fostering, utilizing social platforms, whatever it might be. Commenting has been so important on the platform, and us kind of popping in there and asking for feedback and asking for our users to tell us what else they'd want to watch, and us actually going finding that and letting them know about it. So I think having those algorithms in place, the machine learning is critical, but I think you can't lose track of the importance of programming and being true to your audience, knowing who they are.
The OTT platforms that we know as they're developing seem to be developing, is this still, there it is, or seem to be developing either long form or short form, but not a mixture. Is that is that just a temporary issue? Is that a discoverability issue? Is that just inherent in the consumer experience? Is that inevitable, or is that just, will change over time?
Yeah, I mean,
Brendan.
to jump in, I think part of it is product decisions from the OTT platform's perspective. I mentioned we talked about the on-demand library with Pluto TV. One of the reasons we chose to launch that, aside from the fact that we had the licenses and we could, and it's an additional incremental usage for our audience, is that discoverability on most platforms, we'll call it Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, in the living room, is built around on-demand. It's built around long-form on-demand, actually. When I say discovery or discoverability, I mean features like universal search, voice search, assistant search, that type of thing, or featuring content, whether it's tiles in their UI, etc. It's built around long-form premium content. What we found is it's the programming, the mix of content that performs exceedingly well, and that's why again we choose to aggregate that into a guide and a list of channels that provide a great lean back experience, regardless of whether it's long form or short form, and really best together in our experience at least. But I think it's partially the product discovery or product architecture choices. I do think there'll be more changes as each of, whether it's those four or any other platform provider, evolve their platforms to make discoverability easier. No one wants to, just like they don't want to search through thousands and thousands of tiles to find a title, they don't want to search through thousands of apps or subscriptions to find what they want to watch either. So discoverability, I think, is key and name of the game.
Yeah, we are having the conversation, what is premium content conversation. I think it depends on what you're focused on and what you're trying to do. But so in terms of long form, short form, I think all of that is blurring a bit. And is it good? I think there's a lot of really awesome content out there. The bar for what is good is pretty high these days. And I think especially younger audiences can sniff it out pretty quickly. So in terms of long form, short form, so on Verve, we have Crunchyroll, which is one of our anime channels, brings 40 new, it's crazy, 40 new series a quarter, which each have 22 episodes per season, and each episode is 44 minutes in length. That's a lot of content, and it's a lot of premium quality, and it's all from TV. It all is coming directly from Japanese TV. That's a lot. That's a high bar, and I think it's a high bar for anybody to compete with. That being said, we also have some exclusive, original, ultra premium series that sit next to that content that are 8 episodes, 11 minutes in length. And in terms of, there's different ways you can look at that content, but in terms of the number of uniques, which is one data point, how many people are watching that, how many people, what we actually like to track are how many people are watching the last episode of the season. That can be on par with some of the biggest IP out there. So I think people are getting good at knowing what good content is and finding that good content, regardless if it's 44 minutes, 11 minutes, or even with some of the stuff we've put together with Dust, which is awesome. We're going to have, 30 different shorts that are ultra premium sci-fi. I mean, you could talk to it better than I can. Shorts that are all up in the service, and we're seeing an incredible amount of engagement. Some of them are 2 to 3 minutes in length, but that's sitting next to those long-form anime episodes, the kind of the mid-form animation episodes, and then these live-action shorts, and we're seeing an incredible amount of viewership across all of them.
Paul,
Yeah, I'll jump in because I think it's really interesting. Like I agree with. It really comes down to what's good, but something that we've paid really close attention to is the big players like Netflix and Hulu have actually, in like the last couple of months, started looking for short form content, and I think for me it kind of is an example of a larger interesting point where we've talked a lot about programming, but I always think about programming, and in the digital age, there's like UX or user experience where that becomes like a critical moment in discovery, or whether it's a guide, is I think a lot of people don't realize how much, whether you're a studio producing content or a platform or a programmer, how when you're on a piece of technology, how much like user experience matters and how quick videos load and how easy it is to find something. And so I think with the short form to long form, where things used, the networks used to produce around ad slots and very regimented segments, where companies like Netflix and Hulu, they're optimizing for how do we keep people on our site the same way a website would. And so my theory is that Netflix and these companies are probably doing a ton of analytics, and they're probably finding, and my assumption is, if you watch an hour-long episode of some show that you're in love with, and Netflix is auto-rolling you into another hour-long episode, as a viewer, the auto-roll is a nice user experience, but you might say to yourself, well, I'm not ready to watch another hour. I need to go to bed and get up. And so I bet you the short-form strategy is going to be, after people watch an hour, they may not be willing to sign up for another hour, but we can probably get them for 10 more minutes. And can we program those 10 more minutes? And so I think there's a really unique opportunity for companies like us and people that are really strong at programming, is not just how you program 20-minute episodes, but maybe the perfect mix going forward is you program an hour, but then you program 10 more minutes, and it's really about extending that user or viewer's time with you, and that's ultimately what the platforms care about is time spent on these platforms.
Well, you can go to that.
Well, I was just going to bring up the fact when I was consulting for an OTT startup last year, I was looking at developing what the original programming strategy was, and was given an extremely small budget for original programming in the first year, as most startups don't really have the resources to do a ton of original programming in the very beginning. So what I came up with was a short form strategy where, since the majority of the programming was going to be acquired in long form, it was to create original programming that was short form and can be used not so much on the OTT platform, but on places like Facebook as a way to bring people to the main OTT platform. So to use short form as your marketing strategy rather than a programming strategy in and of itself, but create short form that could later be aggregated once you have produced enough of it into half-hour magazine type programs, so that you're not wasting your money. Well, you're doubling the effectiveness of the money you're spending, so it becomes both a form of promotion and eventually part of your programming library as well.
So I'm going to wear two hats. The first hat is my broadcast television hat. So I come from that arena, and so from the WB, CW, and CBS. So it's been fascinating to see, and challenging at the same time, because we always wanted to be the destination, and now there's so many. You should see our pitch when we go to markets and say, we are in competition with OTT, and we want to be the destination for broadcast television. The second thing is you all talk about data and analytics and how it's vital to your business. I'd like to, and I didn't write down your first names, I only have last names. So Mr. Berman, talk to me about Crunchyroll, because as a mom, my 16-year-old is on that. And not only do you look at the data and analytics, do you do focus groups that my son could be a part of. Do you know what I'm saying? They say, will he watch the 44 minutes? I can tell you the answer is yes.
So the question, how do we think about data and analytics?
Focus groups. Do you do focus groups?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. With Crunchyroll specifically, it's a bit simpler because our programming is very straightforward. It's anime. So if it's on Japanese television and it is anime, we work on bringing it here. Verve's a bit more complicated because we're trying to now take that next step to figure out, in addition to anime, what else do they like? And it has been very fascinating to bring in the audiences. We are constantly doing focus groups. We actually, and the best place to do it are all the live events that are happening. So we are there at these live events, and it's the best chance to interact with our communities. We actually, through our own, so I think the other thing we're seeing in terms of like owning, you mentioned on the front part of your comment around kind of being the destination. I think there's a question that we're going to have to answer the next couple of years here, specifically a lot of the traditional channel partners. Do you care about being the destination or that people go to, or the brand that they care about? And it's something we challenge ourselves with a lot. Like, yes, you get more data if they're coming to you, but if there's this crazy brand affinity for what you're building and they'll go wherever that brand is, it could be just as important. So with Crunchyroll, for instance, we actually had our first Crunchyroll Expo. We launched our own live event. We had never done it. We had 40,000 people come. And we weren't prepared. It ended up being an incredible event, and you saw this kind of deep connection with the audience and how much they care about this. So as I was kind of mentioning earlier, we really do leverage our audience to tell us what they care about, and we try to super serve that. And you know, our goal is creating a better universe for fans. So that's, you know, utilizing the focus groups, understanding who they are is critical to us, and we're getting smarter and smarter about it every day. But.
Hi, John Burke with Al Roker Entertainment. Complete transparency, we have a deal with you guys, with Pluto, for content. And we are a TV company. We do TV shows, been doing them for 24 years now. And this new model is fantastic, and I've been pushing our company in that direction for a long time. I'm curious about the deal between Ryan and Eric. So you guys pitched them on a show called Dust, and they do the distribution of that show. You guys do the production and the marketing, correct? And then what's the revenue model?
Sure. So it's actually bigger than a show. So what we actually want to do with Dust is we have a bunch of SVOD services. We currently do not have a sci-fi SVOD service, and we actually would like to figure out how we can bring more sci-fi to our channel. So it's bigger than that, where we'd ideally have a Dust channel there. Now, having a Dust channel on Verve, what's the business model there? What does that mean? And we actually do hope to work with more traditional network partners, and without necessarily having to go build your own apps, build an entire technology. I mean, our product and engineering team is 250 people. And we're still early. Without having to go do that on your own, how can we help folks who are awesome programmers, awesome content creators, existing networks who know how to really do that well, kind of incubate and put a channel there? If you have your channel here, for any AVOD consumption, any free viewing, it's kind of the standard model, which is 70-30, so 70% of the revenue goes to you. Anybody who comes and signs up for your channel a la carte and just picks your channel to watch, again, 70% of all that revenue ongoing on a subscription basis goes to you. And where I think what I'm personally most geeked out about with Verve, which kind of takes a next step with the traditional model that exists with the cable bundle, is we do have this bundle. And the question becomes, how do you ascribe value for all these channels as a portion of that cost? Of the $10. And today, Nielsen is kind of the major piece, and people negotiating in a room in terms of the per sub fee on a channel basis. What gets really fun for us, being a digital platform and a digital bundle, we can put an algorithm together that actually says, what is the value of your channel relative to these others? How many people come and watch your content first and subscribe? How many people are likely to go watch these other channels? How many people are likely to watch for 10 hours? Whatever it might be, and it doesn't have to be this like crazy rating samplings of users, but we can know. We'll actually be able to ascribe that value to each of them. So that's when it gets really exciting for us.
Gentlemen on the end, you mentioned consulting for OTT services and recommending putting content on Facebook. When you're dealing with Facebook, how do those deals get structured when they know they're dealing with somebody that's launching their own OTT platform?
Well, we didn't get to the point where we actually got into the negotiations with Facebook on that point. I was basing most of my assumptions on the interaction I have working with Occupy Democrat, which is about 7 million followers. And the best I can say about Facebook is that in the last 3 months, everything's changed with the new algorithms. I can't say for certain how successful any new video launch on Facebook will be without knowing exactly what the content is and how Facebook will regard it now that they're under fairly heavy scrutiny for what they're doing and what they're distributing.
I'll jump in here. Having a partnership with Facebook for quite some time, they are the 800-pound gorilla on every aspect of every reach imaginable. They have immense granularity, so they can micro-target, geo-target better than anybody on the planet. And it's really a combination of what it is that you want to accomplish with Facebook. So, we end up playing the supplier and the vendor. So we literally do have a partnership with them. We write them checks, they write us checks. And what they can do and what they can deliver across the world, there isn't anybody that is even remotely close to them. They are just that powerful in their sophistication of reaching a specific audience. It doesn't matter what audience it is, what the theme is, it doesn't matter where they're at. They literally have the world covered, and they do it better than anybody has ever tried to do it.
Hey, thank you guys. First of all, the insight is awesome. I really like hearing everything that you're talking about and getting really granular and deep and building it and what goes into it. So I work for a digital marketing agency, and a lot of what we're seeing with a lot of OTT clients, Amazon is kind of like this big elephant in the room. They're driving so much of these DTC subscriptions. I'd just love to hear what you guys think about that, how you're planning on addressing it, taking them down, that kind of stuff.
Sure, I'll start. Amazon's a great partner of Pluto TV's. Fire TV, we think, has been very successful as a platform. I think anyone who is in any business sees Amazon entering their space as a potential threat, or just as a potential threat in general. But that being said, it's been a very mutually beneficial relationship. Fire TV devices have a wonderful free TV option that doesn't require, not only is it free, no subscription, but doesn't even require a login with Pluto TV, and it's been strong so far. Now, there's always rumors about what's coming on the horizon with them, and for us, it's been just kind of taking things as they come and trying to maintain a strong partnership.
Sounds like you're asking. The device side is obviously, they are really important, and then they also have the subscription channels, which are. So they from a competition standpoint, I think it's helped platforms like ourselves, and they're creating another reason for people to go and build these channels and have them on there. I think Amazon's a bit unique though, because Amazon is the everything store. Their goal is they just want to have the world's content and have that on their platform for you to pick and choose what you want. So when you think about the channels on Amazon, I think the majority of folks who are finding themselves subscribing to those channels have actually come for just a show that they search for, find, it shows up because it's also on Amazon channels, and I have the option to rent, buy, or take a free trial for 7 days to watch the show, and I'm going to go down that path. So I think when it will become interesting for them is they start thinking about bundling, which they haven't done. They have each channel for its discrete price, and they're probably the best bundler in the world right now with the Prime bundle. So I think it becomes very interesting when they start doing that. But in the meantime, I think they're giving another way, similar to us, where you don't have to go build your own SVOD app and go and do that, which is very difficult. don't recommend it. But you can actually use Amazon channels to incubate, or Verve in kind of a similar way, incubate your offering, get to know your audience, see if there's something really there, figure out your programming expertise, and then you can decide if you want to roll it out to direct to consumer. So,
and one other part of the Amazon, we supply content to Amazon, but on the e-commerce side. So, more than half of all search on e-commerce is going to Amazon. And what we're learning, and this relationship is about 3 years old, what we're learning is what I mentioned earlier about Facebook. The same applies to Amazon on the e-commerce side. There is an enormous amount of sophistication with what is happening and how they are predicting what your buying patterns are. And more, they're asking content companies like us that are in the short form environment that can produce content at scale to match the purchasing with content. So an example, in our health and wellness side, where we produce a lot of it, you will go and look at health and wellness products on Amazon, and immediately you will be offered a video that says you may be interested in watching something about this. So that level of sophistication is now showing up in the ROI, and they are tying content to e-commerce, and make no mistake about it, at the end of the day, that's what their interest is the e-commerce play.
Questions? I'm on this side of the room, so yes.
I'm still trying to understand your relationship with Facebook. Because when Facebook shows me a video, it comes from a page. It doesn't just show up as a random video in my feed. Whose pages are your videos attached to? Like, I don't understand. They pay you for video and place it where?
Yeah, it's a combination. So we do all of that, and then we are part of an audience network for them. So we're actually finding new audiences for Facebook. So it is a whole approach to how Facebook reaches different audiences, more specifically in emerging markets and areas. So they're looking at bringing in more audiences that they can deliver ad dollars or advertising messages around, and that's where we play on that side of it. The other part is simply just the 101, where we have clients that are looking for Facebook, and they want to make sure that whatever we buy as an advertiser, when we're going in and promoting our content, that Facebook is part of it.
This is all part of the paid Facebook.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I was just a little confused because I'm trying to figure out, like, you said you have a network of publishers that you also send short films to. Are these licensed non-exclusively to those publishers?
Yes.
So this is how you get a viral video, is that you have the same video, but it shows up on Mashable, and it shows up on BuzzFeed, and it shows up on Yahoo, and all those, you have that.
Correct.
That's your network.
So
if
right.
we wanted to make a video and we wanted to make it viral, we could go to you and say, here's my video, put it out on your publisher network because I want millions of views.
No, because we won't take anybody's video unless we produced it, right? Okay. So it has to be our IP or a licensed IP. So in the case of Warner, it's a licensed IP. Everything else, it's our own intellectual property. If we produce it, we distribute it. We do not play distribution for anyone.
So you're like an agency?
No, we produce. We're a large producer. We produce a lot of content. So we are the production company and the distribution platform that takes a video from IP all the way to execution.
You're a short-form studio, basically.
Pretty much.
Or you'll license short-form video en masse from producers of long-form.
Correct.
So
Correct.
like BBC.
Correct. In the case of BBC, where we are licensing their product, we are also influencing the final product. We can go into post-edit and create out of that vast library a product that we know our audience wants wherever it is in the hemisphere.
Questions?
I have a question for
Yes.
the other panelists here, which is one of the things that we were thinking about as we were launching our OTT channel is how the OTT market was going to develop and how similar the evolution was going to be to how things moved from broadcast TV to cable TV. Now, with the beginning of OTT platforms, you had Netflix, which started off primarily as a movie service, but has obviously branched into TV series. Hulu started primarily as a on-demand version of networks, and Fox and ABC and the other partners in Hulu, put their shows up there, NBC. When we were thinking about launching our OTT service, the idea was that it would develop much like cable did, where when cable first started, okay, broadcast TV is the broad general audience. Let's get very specific and get to targeted demos and targeted psychographics, hence MTV, CNN, ESPN in the early days of cable. Do you see the advantage at this point yet of, say, Crunchyroll being just targeted at anime, or individual Pluto channels being just targeted at certain audiences? And do you think that can overcome the momentum that players that like Netflix have grown so big and have a large general audience? Can you still prosper in that system?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I would say, if that was a yes/no question, yes. We do see a benefit to, for example, I think we have a somewhat similar strategy in, I wouldn't necessarily call it niche targeting, but find an underserved audience and give them what they're looking for when it comes to content in a consistent way. If you love anime, you know Crunchyroll. I mean, that's it. We also have an anime channel, by the way, called Anime All Day, and you might know that as well. Yeah, we found, I mean, again, so Scripps, I guess now Discovery, a good partner of ours, and an investor actually as well, but content partner that, there's a reason why in cable, their channels have fantastic performance and session duration. Most notably, you know what's on HGTV right now, or any time of the day, it's house stuff. It's always house stuff. But what's on like the local NBC affiliate right now? I don't know. But it could bounce between 12 different genres in 12 half-hour segments. And so it's not really conducive to long-form viewing. And you'll find most of my answers are going to be skewed to linear, because that's kind of the world we live in at Pluto. But for us, yeah, finding that niche audience, having a consistent programming strategy around it, and being able to, because it's kind of the best of both worlds, digitally targeted, yet the performance of TV, which would be my probably only counterpoint to the 800-pound gorilla that is Facebook and their massive reach, is that yes, but, or yes, and can they get someone to watch an ad all the way through to completion with the audio on, like 100% of ads are on Pluto TV. And I'll let you speak to that, not to bash your partner, but it's a challenge sometimes when you're looking to flip through, content and waste time on Facebook to get someone to watch a 30-second spot with audio on. Is tough. In linear TV, it works, and so. But bouncing back, yes, is the short answer. It's been hugely beneficial to us to be able to do that and digitally target and bring in audiences, and then show them, by the way, here's 100 other channels that you didn't know you loved, and can have as your TV substitute if you want, or more likely your addition to your existing TV subscription. I think you mentioned people are building their own bundles, so to speak, and we find that to be very true. And it's funny, when we launched, we thought we were the cord cutter solution, but what we're finding more and more is, yes, there's absolutely a good segment of Pluto TV users that are cord cutters. There's also an equally noticeable segment that are finding Pluto TV is a great and easy addition to their existing service. So maybe they have Crunchyroll, maybe they have Hulu, and they don't have a cable subscription, but then Pluto gives them the rest of what they're missing.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Like, when you go to Netflix, you're just part of the masses, and you're there, and you're just going to watch whatever they're telling you to watch. And I still feel that communities matter. People want to be a part of those communities. We saw that by throwing our own event, how many people showed up. There is something special to that. It's natural, I think, in all of us. And I think the ability to create those channels and those focused offering for those communities and truly be one of the community, not just trying to try to build your own community or kind of do the mass thing, like really caring about it is what's made Crunchyroll special. Like, our audience works there, and I think there's something unique there. And the other piece you can take from that is Netflix also, at least for the time being, is focused on just being the best provider of video content. And with a Crunchyroll, with some of these other, with a Shudder, with a Curiosity Stream, you can create all these other, you can be a mini Disney, if you will. You can have merch, you can have live events, you can do theatrical, you can create augmented reality, whatever it might be, and you can do the full 360 component for that audience as well, and really become their destination for more than just video, but the entire experience. I think that's when it gets really special.
Do you have by being the sort of first mover in, say, the anime space, you're kind of cutting off the rest of the competition to a certain extent, because whoever's first in the market winds up getting the majority of the of that audience. So is it a matter of how big a niche do you need in order to make a service profitable? If you're in a niche that no one is quite conquered yet, then you've got a chance. But somebody trying to start a competitor, you've got contracts with all the distributors for anime. It would be hard for somebody else to come in and steal your thunder at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Crunchyroll is in a very unique position in that, right? There's not another category of content that you could potentially go own, per se. Yeah. In terms of actually having all of it like Crunchyroll does, but you can begin to become the leader of a category, per se. I think Adult Swim has done that almost with animation at this point. Like, they don't have all the animation, but if I talk about who's the best adult animation, it's Adult Swim, and they represent that. They're true to their brand, they're true to the audience, they care. And I think that shows through, and that's why people, it's the most popular cable brand I think there is today.
I think with niche, like the kind of internet and digital revolution has made, like, my concept of what the size and makeup of a media company is really ranges, where there's still the Netflixes and NBCs and the Crunchyrolls and the Dusts, but like, I have many friends that are 5-person teams that run YouTube channels, and I consider them media companies because they have merch, they have advertising, they have a studio. And so I think there are like niche audiences and underserved audiences. The small ones you can serve. I think there's certain ones you can't serve as a media company because you need a certain scale, and you're aiming to build a multi-billion-dollar company, where the beauty I've seen working at YouTube previously is there's 5 to 10 person companies that are mini media companies in their own right, and they can be a $2 to $5 million a year company, and they have no ambition to scoop up more channels or anything like that. And so that's what I think is really interesting, and kind of the fracturing where you're just going the next level down, where an individual person or a 5-person team can be a media company with multiple revenue streams and reach a scale of a certain size. So I think there's opportunity there, in addition to all the other kind of levels that we're operating at.
The other thing that kind of next step in the way it went in broadcast to cable was then the consolidation. Do you see OTT channels now getting rolled up into mini conglomerates that would own a big bundle of OTT channels? And how's that affected you so far? Have you seen people chasing after Crunchyroll to make them make you all millionaires? And
yeah. So I that hasn't happened in terms of like, yes, people are constantly, it's really fun for me on both sides, because I'm looking at who are the channel partners we want to add to Verve, and then everyone's also asking my team for Crunchyroll. So we kind of have that conversation too, like what would that look like? But in terms of the consolidation, I think you're already seeing folks start to try to do that. Like AMC now has their slate of OTT apps and OTT channels that they're running. Lionsgate was working on that for a while. It was an ambition, I thought, of NBC, and then CISO happened, and I think they've slowed their roll there a bit. But that's what we're also trying to do with Verve and putting these all together. We believe in the third-party channels, being the programmers, understand the audiences, going deep on that, but we can also put them all together in this bundle offering where they can actually see the similarities between them. Like, we're very thoughtful around the channels we add. We're not, like, we don't have the Home and Garden channel on Verve next to Crunchyroll. We have the animation channel, we have the Shudder channel, horror. Like, we've been very thoughtful around those kind of content types. And then you can naturally allow some of these audiences to bridge with one another. Like with Crunchyroll, surprisingly, anime keeps getting more and more popular. It's becoming more of a mainstream kind of thing. There's not a lot of that out there, but we also want to figure out how can we create more anime fans through these other verticals, and how can we take our anime fans and put them to where they are as well. And I think you have to kind of start aggregating these things up and then put a unique value proposition, be it a bundle offering, together to really help justify that.
I would go as far as to say that's the only way it works. I mean, to be frank, I mean, so many have tried to launch, an independent SVOD offering, and the consumer, I think, is fairly loudly spoken in that they don't really want to, unless it's a niche where they absolutely must have their anime content. They really don't want to maintain 12 different apps, 12 different logins, 12 different everything else to be entertained. So for OTT, I think it's imperative to be a part of an aggregator in some fashion.
Ryan, we hear all the time the programming's got to be quality, quality, quality. That's a given. What is quality in OTT programming? What do you find that works, and what have you learned that doesn't work? And I want to ask Bob the same question on the short form
That's a hard
side.
question. I mean, my first instinct is it isn't necessarily tied to like production investment or production quality. I think quality, at least to me, and what we've found is having a strong point of view, and that you can. And storytelling is kind of cliche as it sounds, but we are working with a partner right now that is sort of new to Facebook and YouTube, and so we're kind of working with them to help them figure out how their content can succeed there. And we were reviewing some of their content, and it's highly produced, it has A-list talent in it, but it's just, I wouldn't call it a good piece of content, especially for YouTube, because it was a minute and a half, and the main feedback we gave is like, watching this minute and a half, if by the end of it, it feels like you're getting part of something and not a whole something, and it was a 1.5 minute clip of a 20-minute thing, and their feedback was like, oh well, we can only have a minute and a half, we can't show the full 20-minute. But to me, Vine videos were 6 seconds, and when you watched a Vine video, you felt like you got a whole something. It was 6 seconds, but you felt like satisfied that that experience was fulfilled, and whether it's 30 seconds or a minute or so I think that's the kind of thing, especially as you think about short form, is a lot of people think about short form as just a length and we're going to cut this up into 5-minute clips, but I think what we've spoken to a lot is there's the fact that you guys can get into the post-production and say, all right, we can chop this up, but we actually want to get into the edit and maybe move things around, maybe do a cold open, those pieces. So I think that quality comes from whatever length you're producing at. Do you still have a strong focus and you're delivering to the viewer something of value, and whether 6 seconds, 6 minutes, or 60 minutes, and also like, does it feel authentic or native, and whether that is, the viewers know when something's been repurposed and it's very obvious, and so that translates to, the trailers that we put out or the content we put out. What we put up on Facebook versus YouTube are two different cuts, because we don't want people to feel like, oh, they just uploaded their YouTube videos to Facebook, or they just uploaded, their snaps to YouTube. So I think those are the new parts of quality that, the tenets of great storytelling, beginning, middle, and end are obviously most important, but the new pieces are, does this feel like a quality experience on this platform, as I'm consuming it, is kind of the new thing that we think about.
Bob, what are you learning about quality?
Yeah,
on the short form
certainly
side?
you can't fool the end user any longer, and you have to be authentic, and everything you produce has to be a digital first. That's very important to us. We will never take anything and regurgitate it. I mean, we have a team of 100 people that are working on content, and everything they may get a master feed, but it is going to be created with a mindset of what that end user wants. The other thing is everything we produce is in 2 formats, 16:9 for desktop and 1:1 for mobile. So that is also incredibly important. People don't realize that the vast majority of people, at least on the short form side, are getting their content on mobile. They don't want to see on a mobile a 16:9 video being served up. You're leaving a lot of spaces, it's awkward, it doesn't look right, and that's the first step to authenticity. So if you're not authentic with your content, what the story is, what the product looks like, you're going to lose the audience very quickly. And I think that's the key to it. And that's why we spend a lot of time looking at what our video through rate is, what percentage of our videos are viewed from 25 all the way through 100%, because that is the important component of creating the content that your audience is going to, in essence, want to come back to see more of.
As a follow-up to your comment, I was curious about the anime and whether or not, since that's originally television content, are you reformatting for mobile, or are you really just finding that your people are happy watching it in the original format?
Oh yeah, I mean, the original format for the anime stuff on all the, we have a lot of original animation that we've been doing and other content. In terms of device and trying to fit content for that device, what we've seen is, people go throughout their day and they're going to watch content where they are during that moment in their day. So yeah, they might not have time to watch the 44-minute long-form anime series, but we're not going to mess with that. It's been done, it's been created the way it was meant to be created, and we're not going to try to create a short version of that. But we will have an 11-minute animation series that we can play that we're seeing perform better on mobile, just because it's shorter, for instance, and then when they get home, they're queued up to start watching anime. But in terms of how we think about quality, we talk about escapism a lot. The people who come to our service, Verve, and if they're watching anime as well from Crunchyroll, they're trying to get lost. They just want to immerse themselves completely in the content, fall in love with the characters, go on that journey with them, get lost in the story, and then after they're done, they go on the forums and they go in comments and they talk about it and argue about the different pieces and create their own videos and whatnot. But that's what we think about as quality. Is it comes down to storytelling. I think that gets lost a lot when we talk about OTT and distribution, which is the storytelling still good? Do people want to follow those stories and fall in love with those characters?
With that, we are out of time. So I want to thank the panelists. Thank you guys for asking a lot of questions. And I'm sure to be happy to field any questions you have. Have a good show.